beyond that, I think we'll just go ahead and pray, and we will get started. Let's pray. Father God, we just thank you so much for this time, God, that we can have our hearts and minds trained in how to have, really just have great relationships with people, with our brothers or sisters of the world. God, it's just so challenging, even during this time, to work through a lot of the, just in division in our own society that we're seeing, Father. But we know that you have a better way. You have a clearer path that we can follow. And we are so appreciative of Jennifer and the others that have been teaching thus far. But for Jennifer today, just to be able to draw our hearts to you, Father, and have our just see what you say from the scriptures about relationships with one another. God, we are so grateful for everyone who's joined us today. God, please be with us and just help us to have a great morning. We love you. Praise in Jesus' name. Amen. And with that, it's all yours, Jennifer.
Well, lovely. It is so great to be with all of you on this. You've got plenty of other things that you could do on a Saturday morning. So I am happy to be with you. When we were talking in our teachers' meetings about what to do for this fall, they had asked, Jennifer, can you do a 5-part series on relationships? And I was like, sure, but there's a lot of people that have some great things to say. So this is the only time you get just me. The rest of the time we have special speakers. And so if you haven't heard them yet, last week was Tim Summerlin. It's all been recorded and you can watch them afterwards. The first week was BJ and I teaching together on empathy. I'm going to tap onto that a little bit today. Next week you're going to get to hear from Shelley Pope, who she and her husband lead Temecula. And we're going to be talking about healthy boundaries in relationships. And she is the queen of that. You're going to mostly hear from her. And then in the final week, you're going to hear from Dave. I just mixed your names together, Deb and Wade.
And Webby. Webby is usually
Webby. And we're going to let them teach on how to really, Deb, maybe you can even say, what's your goal for
the culture of power, and how both as you approach somebody in a position of power, how you humbly talk to somebody in a position of power. And then if you are a person who is in a position of power, how to take that power responsibly and really reach out to people. Humbly.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so that's important. We wanted to include in these classes some attention to leadership and how we should be in relationship as far as with leadership. So that's our final one. So today I'm going to talk on something that's near and dear to my heart. So I thought if I can get one class, I'm going to do it on validation. Some of you who have taken any of the marriage trainings that I've done, I teach this class. This is the core of the work that I do as a therapist. So I'm excited that I get to take this time to go over in a little bit more detail, since it's the whole focus of this time, what it means, how to do it. We were hoping to do breakout rooms today, but for some reason, this platform is not allowing us to. So I'm going to give you some things to do with somebody afterwards that we would have done in breakout rooms. But what we're going to really hit on today is what is validation and some really practical ways to do it. In my work as a therapist, I would say this is the thing that has helped people in their relationships that I work with professionally, and then definitely in the work that I do with disciples in our ministry. But I would say it's also been super, super helpful for me, as even though I teach it, I've done research on this. I have, I teach it to university students. I've written about it, and I tell you, it's still hard for me to do. So this comes from an ongoing growth on my own part. So I'm going to go ahead and share with you the PowerPoint and go from there. So let's do the slideshow from the beginning. The art of validation, would say it is a bit of art getting this process down in life on how to validate. I'm going to explain what I mean by validation in a little bit. This is my family. For those of you who don't know me, I love this picture. This is the baptism of our youngest son, Landon, who is now in Spain, and he's a student there. Pray for him. All kinds of pieces there to pray about. But I love my family. This picture just makes me happy. And I have to say that as much as I love my family, this validation thing we're going to go over today, I have the hardest time doing it with the people I love the most. We get activated when we're in a conversation with people that we're close to, and sometimes it's really hard to hear them and validate what they're saying. And so hopefully this will be helpful in your relationships with family, in your relationships with work. When I do this with couples I'm working with, I coach validation. It usually takes me, like today, I'm teaching it to you. I do that in my sessions. I teach validation, and then it takes me at least 4 sessions to actually coach it. So it's a process, but then I review it over and over for months and months after that. Well, in living color, I am constantly realizing how I don't put it into practice in my own relationships. But one of the things that comes up for people is once they learn it, even in their marriage, they find that they're using it with their kids, with their coworkers, with their grandchildren, with their friends at church, with leaders. So I do hope that this will help you, not just in any one relationship, but in your relationships overall. My goal in helping people with validation is to bring about connection. This is really about enhancing the verbal and emotional part of connection in your relationships. And I do think that starts first and foremost in that deep, genuine connection with God. God is a God of empathy. If you have a chance, you can go back and listen to the class on empathy that was 2 weeks ago that BJ and I did. And we talked a bit about God is a God of compassion. And that is, if we want to be people of compassion that show, that validate other people, or if we want to experience validation, get close to God. God is the God of that. He is a God of compassion. He cares about how we feel. He gets in our shoes with us. So that's where we need to always start. To have that deep verbal and emotional connection does mean being able to genuinely share heart to heart. You know, in doing this work with people a lot in the last 15 years, especially professionally, but even as a disciple all of these years, some of us, this is hard to do. The heart to heart sharing, you know, we might share facts about what's going on, but really sharing from a heart level, for some listening today and in this class today, that may be where it's hard for you. So hopefully today will give you some help with that. How do you share so that other people can get in your shoes and be there for you and be connected to you? Also, you're going to be in conflict with people in all of your relationships. And so I am a great believer in that conflict can actually lead to connection instead of disconnection. You can actually feel closer and more intimately connected to people when you have conflict. And I think it's how we have the conflict that can really change that. Our goal today in talking about validating each other is that we would have a deep, genuine understanding of one another and have empathy. And so we're going to talk, this is a very practical class today on how to get there to those places. So it does start first and foremost in our intimacy with God. God knows us intimately. Psalm 139, he knows our thoughts. He knows when we lay down. His hand is upon us. We just had a women's Bible talk, and we were talking about all the scriptures about do not fear. And Jesus literally, it says, after he was transfigured on the mount with Peter and James and John, they were scared, and he puts his hands on, it says he touched them and said, don't be afraid. I mean, God literally uses touch to reassure us. He knows everything about us. He cares about every area. He knows he knit us while we were still in our mother's womb. And then look at these beautiful words about how he talks to us, how he interacts with us. I have summoned you by name. You are mine. I love this part. I know, being a mother of 4 kids and being a married person, when my husband walks in a restaurant, I always have that, that's mine, that feeling. And I do, my children, I remember just as they're born, you're holding them in your arms and you're like, this child is mine. And just the other day, I was doing FaceTime with my youngest son who's in Spain. And he's like Mr. Sparkly Eyes. It's so fun to talk with him. And I just looked at him on that FaceTime and I was like, God gave me this child as my son, mine. That emotion that we feel about those that we're in love with, that we love deeply, that's how God talks about us. And it's really vital to really learn this kind of intimate connection with others. We have to first really ground it in God, that he feels that way with us. You are mine. He calls us beloved. He holds us by our hand. There's that touch again. We're engraved on his palm. And I love this last part. He carries us in his arms close to his heart. He doesn't just carry us in his arms. He carries us in his arms close to his heart. So we are created to be intimately connected. God made us that way. And I'm really hoping that today will help enhance your connection with God, and it will help enhance your connection with others in your life, other relationships. So I do want to take the time to just, I'm going to interact. I'm going to interchange the words connected and the words intimacy a lot. So I want to define what I mean by that, because that's the goal of validation, is that connection. I'm a researcher, and they've literally researched intimacy and said, this is what it is. Sharing something meaningful, personal, and private, verbally or non-verbally, like when you're sharing humor or a nickname or showing some affection or just having this kind of, you get each other, you both know what the other one's thinking without even saying it. It's also when you share things you're joyful about, things you're scared about, the fears you have, and things you're hurt about. And I love this one. It's this feeling that you are deeply known. Someone knows all your junk and all your good stuff, your strengths and your weaknesses, your mistakes, and they love you, accept you, and respect you and care for you, even though they know all your junk. That is the heart of intimacy. I love that definition. Don't we want to feel like this person, this is about the heart-to-heart sharing. This person knows me, and I tell them stuff, and they get in there with me, and they feel it with me, and even when they see the yucky things about me. This is a book by Kelly. And again, all of this work on intimacy is not about marriage. We tend to think of the word intimacy to mean like sexual intimacy, but that's not what the word in research means. It means intimate connection with people. So you can actually have an intimate connection when you sit down next to somebody waiting for a plane. You know, have you ever been there where you sat down next to somebody and they pour out their heart to you, and you pour out, and you've like never met each other and you're never going to see each other again. And you just had this like connection. So that's one form of connection, right? But sometimes we can safely tell people we never see again some stuff we might not tell those we're closest to. But, you know, there are so many different types of and levels of connection. For most of our relationships, we tend to just share cliches and facts and opinions, like kind of that upper layer. And then what that sharing heart to heart looks like is when we're sharing hopes and dreams and feelings and fears and failures and weaknesses and needs. Do we share our weaknesses? Do we share our failures? And then if someone comes to you and shares their fears, their failures, their hopes, their dreams, how do you respond? When they share their needs, or if they share something that happened between you that hurt them, are you able to hold that in your hands and have connection through that conversation? So that kind of intimacy, that kind of intimate communication is what we're aiming for today. The reality is, though, it's actually dangerous to do what we're talking about today. I literally just had a client say in the session I had with them yesterday, he didn't want to tell other people in their lives about some things going on for them because he said, I'll be exposed and it'll feel shameful and I'll be embarrassed. Exposure, when you tell somebody how you're really feeling, you're really exposing yourself. And I do want to say, when your best friend, when your another disciple, when your family member, when your spouse, when your child shares something with you, be aware they are taking a risk. They're exposing themselves. So you want to carefully hold that in your hands, because how you respond will have a big impact on whether they feel like they can keep exposing. Sorry, I moved that too fast. So when you're the person sharing, you can fear that maybe they will just go, like they just won't respond much. They won't say much. They might say, well, you shouldn't feel that way. You're like, why are you saying that? There might be this feeling of being rejected and abandoned when you share. So or they might use, if you're open and honest about something you're feeling or something you believe about what's going on in the world, someone might use that against you in some way. Or if you share your mistakes or your failures or your weaknesses, they might use it against you. So it's a risk. I actually once taught a lesson on people pleasing. And I talked really specifically about my pride and how I really like, even doing a lesson like this, I'm a people pleaser. I want people to like me. And so I struggle with what people are thinking, especially in my early years, but still to this day, it's a challenge at times. So I shared how this is terrible, but I was getting ready to prepare for the lesson. It was one of the first times that we were having women teach devotionals. So this was 10, 12, 13 years ago. And I was so excited to do it. And then 2 women had already taught before me. And I had this really arrogant thought of, they'll find that my lesson's even better. And I was appalled. I was so embarrassed that I thought it. And I thought, I'm going to teach a lesson on people pleasing. And I did it while preparing the lesson on people pleasing. So I started the class on that Wednesday night. And I started with sharing. I want to tell you, this is literally what I thought as I prepared this lesson. And then I went on to teach on people pleasing and how challenging it is. Well, I had someone share with me sometime later, actually a number of years later, that since that class, they had been kind of appalled by my character, that I would be somebody that thinks that way and feels that way. And I'm using that just to say, it doesn't matter where we are in life. When we share our stuff, it might bother somebody. They might hold it against you. They might throw it at your face the next day or 5 years later. You are vulnerable. The word vulnerable, actually in Latin, the root of it is vulner, and it means wound. When you make yourself vulnerable, you're making yourself woundable. Whether it's teaching a class like this, and by the way, if you have things to say to me after this, it is okay to come and tell me. But we are making ourselves woundable when we just talk to a close friend or to somebody at church or to a leader. I can't wait for Deb and Wade's class. We are making ourselves vulnerable even when we listen, actually. And this next part is important, because sometimes when we share, we might fear a loss of control, or that we might get really angry and we're afraid of telling how we feel because we might get really angry and our own destructive impulses might happen. But the other part is, when we're the listener, we might fear being engulfed. And this is why a lot of times we don't want to listen. We might get engulfed by their anger, their feelings, that they think we should agree with them and sacrifice ourselves. There are risks to listening to someone share and to sharing. And that's why, honestly, a lot of times we don't do it because the risks are so real. There are risks to sharing what we really think and what we really feel. Honey, do these pants look too tight? She's asking him, and he's like, do I tell her? Because if I really tell her what I think, I love on the bottom, it says, just be honest. Thin ice warning. Just be honest, but the ice is thin, the water is cold, and you will go down if you really say what you're thinking. Well, so it might go really negative if you tell someone what you're thinking. I love that one. This is what we're aiming for. So the art of validation is the name of this class. We're aiming for understanding. Stephen Covey says it well. He's got some great books out. And he says, if I were to summarize in one sentence the single most important principle that I have learned in the field of interpersonal relationships, if you've never read his books, they're great, it would be this: seek first to understand, then to be understood. We've heard these words. This principle is the key to effective interpersonal communication. We spend so much energy trying to get the other person to understand our view. And what would it be like if we were to use all that energy instead on understanding them? How different our relationships would be. I'm going to go into that a little bit more as we keep going. This is the definition of what we're going to do today. This is actually the Webster Dictionary definition of validation: making something valid. Well, there you go. We're done. What does that mean? That what someone is sharing with you is well-grounded. It's justifiable. It's relevant. It's meaningful. It's logically correct. It makes sense. That's okay. That makes sense that you would feel that way, think that way. If we could just change this one thing when we listen to people, to convey in some way, not the fake, oh, so that's what you're thinking. That's acknowledgement. Acknowledgement is not the answer for deep connected relationships. Going, okay, that, I see that you're saying, I see that you feel that way. That's acknowledgement. We're talking here about saying, well, that makes sense. That's understandable. That's a pretty meaningful experience. It's logical. I might not share how you feel. I might not agree with your perspective. We might have different thoughts, but actually your thought's valid just as much as mine is. That's what we're aiming for. So let's look at what the scriptures say about validation, because the bottom line is that it's about understanding. It's about saying, I understand you. I'm in your shoes. Proverbs 4 verse 7 says, though it cost all you have, get understanding. In other words, to understand somebody else, you're going to have to pay the price. Philippians 2 talks about that. Consider one another better than yourselves. Looks not only to your own interests, but to the interests of others, taking on the very nature of Christ, who made himself nothing. I'm paraphrasing, but the cost, when you consider understanding the other person, putting understanding them above being understood yourself. When you say, I'm going to consider your interests, your need for understanding as more important than mine, you're literally putting the cross into practice, literally, in your relationships. This is not about being a doormat. I'm just always going to pay attention to the other person and understand them. I'm going to share with you in a little bit this is not the same as being a doormat, because you still need to say what you're feeling and thinking. You still need to speak the truth in love, and you still need to be honest and direct and assertive. But if we were to make more important understanding the other person, goodness, how different things would be. And it's going to cost us. And we're going to look at a process that I call validation, and it involves this in Proverbs 20. The purposes of someone's heart are deep waters. So this person coming to you, they got deep waters. I'm deep waters. They're deep. And a man of what? a man of understanding draws them out. I really appreciate my husband with us today, but whenever we teach together on validation, he always says, I have such a hard time at this. Asking questions to draw people out. I appreciate that he's willing to say, I have such a hard time. I'm a therapist. I have a hard time. I teach how to do this. And often I'm already thinking all kinds of things. We get caught in this chatterbox in our head that's giving us what to say next. It is hard to say, I want to understand this person and draw them out. This is my favorite, Isaiah 58. What it literally says in verse 9, if you do away with the pointing finger, and here's the cost, though it costs all you have to get understanding, and spend yourself on behalf of the hungry. There's spend it all on that person that's hungry for understanding, and you satisfy the needs of the oppressed. This is important. Again, going back to the empathy lesson, we talked about this. Then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy. What does he do? He will satisfy your needs. Funny how that works in a sun-scorched land, and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. So God's promising here. Often what happens in conflict is we go, well, you, and then there are some of us who don't actually point the finger. We don't verbally say, well, but we're doing it internally. So finger pointing, even for a quiet person who never says anything, can happen. So when we finger point, it's problematic. He says, do away with it. And instead, again, this is the put all that energy towards understanding. And look what God does. You won't be a doormat. God promises he will meet your needs. He will guide you and he will strengthen you. He will meet your needs. This is what's important with validation. You're taking this class right now, but the person you would really like to validate you might not be. God promises if you validate them, God will meet your needs, even if the other person doesn't. And let me say that again. Even if the other person doesn't learn this thing that we're talking about today, God can fill your cup up with you need to be understood as well. So what would it be like if we really spent all that time focused on understanding the other one? What it says here at the bottom of Isaiah is, you will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Deep, intimate connection through these kinds of intimate communications, these honest, genuine talking, leads to this rich green life. When I'm working professionally with people, I say, so where's the most green, gorgeous, beautiful place you've been? And you can put this in the chat, actually, but in fact, go ahead and do that. I can't see the chat right now. I don't know why, but put it in there because I'd love to see it later. People put all kinds of different things. I actually had somebody put Balboa Park and the greenery there and the enclosed, I can't get the word. So, right, like it can be something like that. But a lot of people say Hawaii. Somebody said Tennessee the other day in an appointment that I was doing. I had somebody say New Zealand. I'm like, yeah, I want to go there. Picture that. That's what God wants to create in your relationships with people. Deep, intimate, green, lush water flowing through. He wants that in your friendships, in your work relationships, in your family relationships, in your marriage with your kids, with your parents. He wants that green, watered, well-watered water flowing through picture. He says you've got to get rid of the pointing finger and instead spend yourself on behalf of the hungry. So incredible promise there. What validation isn't, and this is important, it is not saying that the other person is right. So you can validate someone and you can say, that makes sense. Your view is valid. Your feelings are understandable. You can do that. And you're not saying, I agree with you and I'm wrong and you're right. That's not what you're saying. It's not saying I agree. validation is also not about facts. And this really ties us up. Well, that's not exactly what happened. So when someone comes to you and they're upset about something, and often what will happen is people get, but that didn't exactly what you said. And no, what you actually said was, and what really happened was, and we get caught in the facts. How somebody feels almost has nothing to do with facts. So I tell people, you know what? There is a certain skill to setting aside the facts. I actually one time was sitting at dinner with close friends of ours, and the husband said, but Jennifer, people will say all kinds of things and it's not factual, and you have to clear up that stuff in order to validate them. And I'm like, you might be surprised at how well you can connect in a relationship if you don't get focused on the facts. It wasn't Aunt Gertrude, it was Uncle Bob. Set that aside and focus instead on going, oh, this is what you experienced. Try it and see what happens to your relationships. Facts can really snag us. What validation is it's saying you're important to me. In fact, you're more important to me than proving that I'm right. I care about you. It really takes learning not to be a defensive listener. Most of us, when someone else is sharing, if they're sharing something about somebody else, we might be able to be a better listener. But if they're coming to us about something that they're bugged about with us, we might be a little bit more like, well, but you, and we might want to explain, or we might want to go, oh, that's not what I meant. I mean, there's so many different ways we can be defensive listeners. So validation is saying, I'm going to set that aside and I'm going to say, you are important to me. I get you. You are valuable to me. You're not alone, and I respect you. That's what validation is. And why is it important? Honestly, all of us want it. We all want to be heard and respected and understood. We all. And if you think, I'm good, call me up. Let's spend some time together. Because I can promise you, this is a human need. We all need it. We all want it. That's what it is. The challenge is there can be a number of roadblocks. I mentioned it earlier. Somebody could take advantage of it. And one of your roadblocks might be, this is not how I talk. It's so flowery to say, so what your feeling is, that's so touchy-feely. Actually, these are the exact words of the first person I taught this process to. I won't say him by name, but he's not on this call, but his name is. In fact, he looks like he's the host right now. He actually gave me permission to use his name. So Ray Schock was the first person who said these words, but this was like 15 years ago, but almost, this has been repeated in my office and in so many talks over and over, is I don't talk like this. It's too flowery. It's too touchy-feely. And it's so bad of me to say it. And Ray can't even support himself after I'm bringing it up. The other big thing, and actually he shared this as well, this takes way too much time. This just takes too much time. Listening to people and validating them. Can't I just say, all right, and go on? For some of us, we just want to be done with the conversation. And so to get into depth and draw somebody out, that's just exhausting. And if I do it, I can promise you they're going to think I agree. And they might. So these kinds of things can be roadblocks. As a reminder, the goal is understanding and empathy. Why empathy? Well, again, research shows this is what it means. Empathy is understanding the meaning that someone is making and putting yourself in their shoes and feeling what they feel. Again, this isn't about agreeing with them. It's saying, I want to understand how you got there, why you felt that way. And that I want to be able to, as much as possible, get in your shoes and possibly go, oh, that's what you were going through. It's shifting. Here's Philippians 2. This is from research, but it's the Bible. I love it when, research proves the Bible's true. Shifting from a self-centered focus to an other-centered focus. Isn't that lovely? That's so Philippians 2. In order to understand and experience the emotional perspective of the other. So that's the technical definition that absolutely comes in with Philippians 2. It's perspective taking. And guess who models it? Is Jesus. He's out and about. A funeral goes by of a widow and her son has just died. And it says his heart went out to her. This is the Greek word splagchnizomai. It's a really long word. It means his guts were moved. It literally means his stomach went oof. And most of us has felt that at some time. Either that you see somebody with a cut and you go, ooh, you know, your stomach goes, ooh, or somebody shares their painful story, or, you know, each of us have at some point usually gone, oh, and you could feel your guts. Jesus, that's exactly what's happening to him. And he said, don't cry. He didn't say, woman, you shouldn't be crying. That don't cry came out of that gut level to what she was going through right at that moment. So empathy is at the heart of God and at the heart of the scriptures. This is what we would have done in breakout rooms, is I would have had you practice the first step towards empathy. So I'm going to explain what I want you to do. I want you to not just listen to this class. I want you to go do it with somebody. Go practice. So those of you who are listening as couples, the moment that we're done with this class, I would like you to practice this on your spouse. Take about 5 minutes. And this is what I want you to do. So take this slide. Everybody take a picture of this slide. Do it with your spouse, or do it with a friend. Do it with a family member. Do it with your kid. Take a picture of this and sit down with them and practice reflection. This is the first part. I'm going to show you the whole process of validation in a moment, but this is the first thing. Think of 2 things, each of you. An encouraging thing that happened this week. What was something that was just encouraging for you this week? And then think of a second thing, something that was kind of difficult. Maybe it was a bummer. Maybe it was painful, something hard that happened this last week. Think of those 2 things and then do this. Decide who's going to go first. And the first person shares. And they say, something that was really encouraging for me this week was getting to talk with my son on FaceTime. The other person then says, something that was encouraging for you this week was getting to talk to your son on FaceTime. And then the other one goes, something that was encouraging for me is, and they finish that sentence. And then the other one just reflects it. You don't add anything. You don't say more. You just reflect it back. Then you go to the second one. So something that was difficult for me this week was when we lost the power connection in the middle of a class. That was me this week. And then the person reflecting says, something that was difficult for you this week was when you lost the power in the middle of a class you were teaching. Yes. And then the other person shares something. Just do that. Share, reflect, share, reflect, share, reflect, share, reflect. I actually just did this with a couple I was working with, and I asked them, how was that? We just did the very first part. And the wife said, it's kind of funny. All he did was say it back, but I felt understood. So surprise yourself. Try this out in your relationships. Take this screenshot, go do it with somebody. Don't just listen to the class. Put it into practice. I wish we could do it in breakouts, but not today. So the reality is you might go and do this with somebody and it doesn't go very well. Or maybe you don't have this perfectly laid out thing that Jennifer just gave you and you try it with someone else and it looks a little bit more like this. That could happen. Or it looks a little bit more like this. Or it feels like this. You're the fluffy white dog and you're feeling like the other person's coming like this. The reality is it might not always go well. So let me give you some input on that. Pay attention to a couple things. In Proverbs 12, it says, reckless words pierce like a sword. When you're the speaker, when you're the person sharing, Try not to do what you see in these pictures or the ones that I just showed you. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but as the speaker, we have to be, it's not like I have to choose my words so perfectly or they're going to be upset. It's, you know what? I want to make sure I'm speaking the truth in love. I don't want to use reckless words that end up leaving someone feeling like they're skewered on the end of a sword. I don't want to end up doing damage to our relationship. On the other side of that is Proverbs 18. A brother wronged is more unyielding than a fortified city. Disputes are like the barred gates. Sometimes when you're the listener, you might literally get so offended that you look, this is actually the barred gates of a citadel. This picture here. Think of a fortified city with its big walls and these gates and these bars. This is often how we get when someone shares with us how they feel. We really do need to, first of all, ground our communication in the scriptures. I want to speak without being a reckless with my words. I want to listen without being a barred gate of a citadel. I want to have God's direction in how. Well, that sounds lovely, but how do you get there, Jennifer? When someone talks to me, I get really upset. So what do? Or when I'm sharing, I get all heated and I can't say it with those perfect words. You might need a timeout. So warning, do not try this at home. Death or injury could occur. We are trained professionals. So you might try to have these conversations with your best friend, with your kid, with your spouse, with your coworker, and it might go bad. Or you might start having a hard time. Timeouts are vital. Often when we're in conflict, our heart rate goes up, like literally, and your face will flush. You'll get what you call the fight or flight or freeze response. Adrenaline floods in your body in about 0.05 seconds. It gets your heart rate pumping. It gets your breathing rate higher and get more oxygen in your body. It gets the perspiration flowing, so your face will flush or your hands will become, your body thinks someone's attacking you. And your body, your brain doesn't know the difference between someone coming at you with a knife in a dark alleyway and someone just sharing words with you in a tone that you don't like. So our brain says, danger, 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 danger. And it starts this adrenaline flowing. It actually takes about 20 minutes for adrenaline to slow back down. So you may need a timeout. And with your friend, or if it's a spouse or a family member, you may need to say ahead of time or have another separate conversation. Hey, when I get activated, I don't do very well. So I'm going to start taking timeouts, and then make sure you do them well. That when you take a timeout, you don't say, you know what, I don't like how you're talking. I need a timeout. And you don't say, you know what, I think you need a timeout. No. Those are big no-nos. Instead, you say, you know what? I can feel myself reacting. And you can, because your heart rate's up. Even if you're the quiet listener, I can promise you, your heart rate's up, your perspiration's up, your respiration's up. Your body, if I were to put little, probes to check your pulse, it's telling me that it's gotten faster. Your body, you can say, I can feel myself reacting, and I really want to have this conversation. So let me take a timeout. And always timeouts, put a time on them. Let me come back. Can we try this again in about 20 minutes? So when someone's sharing with you, or if you're sharing and you find yourself getting overcome with your physical bodily reaction, take a timeout. Put a time on it. And then if you take the time out, make sure that you come back. Say to your friend, can we talk about this in 30 minutes? And then come back. Can we talk about this tomorrow morning when we meet for a prayer time? Can we talk about this after dinner tonight? Put a time, a specific time on it. And then if you take the time out, you have to be the one to come back. By the way, all of this is detailed. Anybody can buy our book, The Art of Intimate Marriage. It's in chapters 3, 4, and 5 in grave detail. Take time outs. I tell you, I don't respond well. I was with my kids the other day. We're in the kitchen, and one of my kids just starts going off about all of the snacks that are in our cupboard and how I don't clean out the cupboards, and how he feels about our cupboards. And I immediately was just like, you know what? Who cooks the food in this house? So obviously I was not in a good spot when he was trying to share with me how he felt about the messy cupboard. I felt a little offended. I was a barred gate of a citadel. When you're in that spot, take a timeout if you can. If you blow it, then you can come back. And I did that day. I blew it. I had to go up later with my husband going, maybe you need to go talk to him some more. And he was up in his bedroom and I had to go up and say, hey, can we talk about that? And I just admitted to him, I was like, I just felt like mad that you were not grateful for all my cooking and you were attacking my dirty cupboards. So, but I am, hey, I really blew that. I didn't put a timeout into practice. When you're activated, don't do what I did. Take a timeout, and then in that timeout, go breathe. So everybody that's listening, do this with me. Breathe in your nose and out your mouth. Blow it out all the way. Blow it out. And do it again. Breathe in your nose and blow out your mouth. So on your timeout, go breathe, go pray, go over some of the scriptures, call a friend, call a lifeline, do what you need so that then when you come back to the conversation, you can come in a better place. When you're the speaker, it's not just about, validation is not just about being a listener. It's also about how you share. So you might need that timeout in how you approach the other. How we share honestly is important, not with an attack, but that we speak the truth in love. So you might be using your timeout because you realize, you know what? I did not do that. I did not speak the truth in love. I shared how I felt, but I just came out, with guns blazing, or I used attacking, blaming words. So you might need a timeout even when you speak, not just when you're listening, but even when you speak. We do need to speak truthfully. Ephesians 4:25 says, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to his neighbor. But this is so hard. Speaking without attacking when we're bothered by something someone's done is really hard. I love this. When I was your age, we didn't have email. If you wanted to say something nasty to someone, you had to do it to their face. Let me tell you, this comes up when I'm seeing people that they get in these arguments on text or they get into arguments on emails. And I'm like, quit using your electronics to have a fight. This is really important. Let me emphasize this. If you need to talk about something even mildly important, don't do it by text. If you feel anything about it that's inside of you, don't do it electronically. Speak the nasty stuff face to face. You do need to do it in a way where you're really, and this is just a very brief thing I'm going to mention here. You want to make sure that you're speaking directly and honestly, where what I call your outsides are matching your insides. You want to be genuine. And I'm not going to go over all this other stuff, but talking straight, having straight communication is a skill. Being direct and honest, and it can be at all levels. This is with yourself, with other people, with God. Being direct where what's coming out of you matches what's happening inside of you is important so that you're genuine, you're congruent. I'm going to skip the rest of this. Validation. So I'm going to go over in the next 10 minutes. I just got a text from somebody saying they like me. Thank you. I feel liked. I need to feel liked today. In this process, I'm going to take about 10 minutes to explain validation, and then we're going to open it up for questions. This is what I do with everybody that's seeing me, and whether they're parent, I've done this with parent and child relationships. I've done this with coworkers. I actually did this live with my boss. I was teaching a workshop on marriage, and he and a bunch of people from his group were at the workshop, and I had just done some things the night before he didn't agree with, and he went and apologized to everybody for me. Wasn't that nice of him? And so I obviously felt a little hurt by his undercutting. And I said, I would have wanted to make that apology if something I did was offensive. So that next morning we talked about it, and he shared how embarrassed he felt about what I did the night before. And I validated him. I did share what I was feeling, that I felt disrespected. He didn't validate it. But I said to him, I said, you know what? I'm teaching this class on validation today. Can we do this live in front of the whole class? We did, me and my boss. And I had him share how embarrassed he felt about what I had done the night before in the class that I taught. And I validated him because I had been in a meeting not long before that where somebody did that to me, and I felt all those same things. So then we did that process, and it was amazing. Honestly, it's probably the cornerstone of what made our working relationship work well. So you can do it boss to employee, you can do it parent to child, you can do it in your marriage. Let me share with you what it means. One issue, one moment. That means when you come to somebody, don't bring up the 5 different times they've done it. Often we are like, we're looking at their face. We're trying to see if they really get it. And if they don't, we say it again. And then we say it this way. And then we say it this way. And we say it like 5 different ways. And we're checking the whole time. Do they look like they're getting it? So we'll bring up all the different issues, or we'll bring up only one moment. Like, so on Friday, when you walked in, you said, and I felt. We'll bring up one moment, but then we'll say, and then I also felt, and then I also felt. We'll bring up more than one issue. One issue, one moment. I statements are really hard. And if you've ever done any training on active listening, you'll have heard some of these pieces, but this is a much deeper process that we're going through today. I statements, though, are difficult for some because we have a hard time figuring out how we feel. And when we say how we feel, we want to use things like, well, I felt like you were mad. We'll assume or we'll attack. I felt attacked by you because you attacked me. So we'll use an I, but we're not using an I. An I statement is when you came in on Friday and you said that I felt small, I felt disrespected. You're not saying you disrespected me, because maybe that's not what they were intending. You're not saying that they are at fault. You're just sharing what it was like for you. It's actually hard to do that without saying you did this. Again, what do we want to do? Get rid of the pointing finger. No blaming, no assuming, no accusing. When you share, speak the truth in love. And this is a hard one. Keep it short. All of us have relationships. Most of us have relationships with somebody that when they talk, they go on and on and on and on. Do you have a coworker or a friend or maybe even someone at church or a family member that when they come to you, when you see them coming and they talk, they're just big talkers? What do? Some of you might go, and I just try to listen. But a good chunk of you go, I walk the other way. I mean, when somebody like comes with a bunch of words, even if we are listeners, there's only so much you can listen to. Your brain just kind of turns off. You might stay present in your body, but your mind is not there. So be aware when you're sharing about something that you're trying to talk to somebody about, keep it relatively like 2 to 3 sentences. When people share in like paragraphs, like 5 paragraphs, it's really hard to hear. And the next job of the validator becomes hard. To reflect, to say, oh, so on Friday when I came home and I said this, you felt small and disrespected. That's a reflection. And you're able to do that if what someone shares is chewable, small enough bites. The next part is what we talked about in Proverbs 20, verse 5, how to ask. So let me give you some ideas on how to ask. If it's a thing that someone's coming to you with because they're upset with you, and they've said, I felt disrespected and I felt unimportant, ask them, when you say unimportant, tell me what you mean. When you say disrespected, tell me what you mean. Use their language. They're giving it to you. You can draw it out just by using the very words they've spoken. Another thing you can definitely do when they've shared with you is ask, these are where you can use factual questions. So this would be, was it my tone of voice? Was it my body language? Was it my choice of words? Was it the timing? Like, go ahead and be vulnerable and draw out some more about maybe the way you handled on Friday when you came in and said that. So the other thing you can do is, if you've been in relationship with that coworker, that friend, that if you're married and you've known each other for a long time, you might know enough about that person to say, so did it seem like, did it feel like? So I recommend 3 levels of questions. The factual, which is, was it my body language? Was it my word choice? Was it my timing? The use their language, which is, when you say unimportant, can you tell me what you mean? And that 3rd level, which is, so it seemed like, did it feel like? You can ask those questions, but what's vital is that you ask those questions from a place of really wanting to understand. That you don't ask them out of, I so don't agree with you, but so why do you say that? If you are not in a place where you really want to understand, take your time out so that you can go and pray, because you love this person that you're talking to. You care about them. They are important to you, and you might need to go get your heart there so that your questions can come from that place of understanding. If you have the chatterbox going off, that's, you have your own defensiveness, you want to explain it to them, you want to apologize, I say take all of those things and place them up on a virtual shelf temporarily. You're not being a doormat. What you feel, maybe your own hurt is coming up. It's important. You don't want to ignore it. You don't want to shove it under the carpet. Or this is a shelf that's not like the shelf where you hide it and close the door. This is the kind of shelf like you have in your house. Some of you in your backgrounds, I might be seeing some shelves behind you. You might have shelves in your house where you place your kids' trophy, or when you went on that trip and you bought that special thing, you might place that, or this plaque award you got. This is the kind of shelf I'm talking about. This is the important shelf. Take what you're feeling, even defensiveness, even wanting to say sorry, even your hurts. You're deciding, I'm going to put this person in front of me first. I'm going to put it up on the shelf temporarily, and take a breath. Everybody with me? I'm going to take the breath so that I can now ask those questions out of the heart of wanting genuinely to understand. But I might need a timeout to get there. Then after I've asked the questions, then I confirm it and I say, so on Friday when I came in and I said, you felt unimportant because of this, and you felt disrespected because of this, and my face was this and my tone was this, and it seemed like this. Did I get that? So the did I get that is confirming. And then empathy is the piece we're all aiming for, which is when someone shares what they're feeling. Let's take those words, I feel unimportant and disrespected. Go to your own experiences, not with the person talking to you, because you don't want to finger point, but with somebody else in your life, your own boss, your own family members, your own friends. Think of a time when you felt unimportant and disrespected. Oh yeah. You know what? Last month I did this presentation and my boss said this afterwards, and I felt so unimportant and disrespected. So I think I can understand how you're feeling. And all of a sudden you've gone from cognitively understanding and acknowledging to gut level, because you remember what it's like, and now your gut is moved and you go, I know what that's like, and I think I can understand what you're feeling. So this is validation. This is the process that takes me many, many sessions to coach through, and I'm still a lifelong learner in doing. We do want to find that gut level experience to understand the meaning that they make. This is the heart of validation. to put yourself in their shoes and feel what they feel, and to be like Jesus with his guts being moved. So this is the warning. Don't try it at home yet. Don't try it yet. Only thing I want you to do after today's lesson is go do the reflection. Do that. Don't try validation yet. Take some time to, when you go back to this, ask yourself, which one of these things is hard for me? Maybe several of them, maybe all of them. Which one of these things is hard for me? I want to learn more about that. I'm going to go read a book. I want to go study some scriptures. I want to get with the person that disciples me and ask them to help me. I want to pray about it. I want to go on a mountaintop and ask God. I want to ask my friend, my partner, my family member to help me with it. I'm going to work on it. So first, go ahead and focus on what you need to change. Pray and be open with somebody. Talk with people close to you. If you need to practice reflection more than just the little bit I gave you, you can actually go on Amazon and buy the Ungame. You can buy, it's a really cool game that helps you practice answering a question and then just reflecting it. And then they get to answer a question and you just reflect it. You can do it with friends. You can do it in a D group. You can buy the all ages version. It's just $10. It's a red box on Amazon of questions in the levels 1 and 2. And you can do it with your kids. You can do there's a family version. There's a kids version. You can do it with younger children. They have a 20s version. They have a retired version. They have a couples version. They have a Christian version. They have a lot of versions. Go buy the Ungame and practice it. You can do it in a D time, in a group, in your marriage. If it starts to not go well, take your time out. And then you might, if you have somebody that's discipling you that you can get with, that can help you resolve that conflict, do that. So you can try it at home, but do all of these things first and then practice validation. So I'm going to stop sharing so that we can open it up for any kind of questions. Oh, I love this. So I got a hand already. There's Mindy Plum with her hand up. Go ahead, Mindy.
Thank you. Thank you for this. So I had a question. I do have a relationship with someone who has a very hard time keeping it short. They do go on and on and on.
Yeah.
And they feel very strongly that that is part of what their process needs to be. And so how would you handle working through that? Because when I try to just focus it on, let's focus on this one thing, she feels cut off or unheard unless she can get all the way through what she feels like she needs to. So how would you handle that in that scenario?
So helpful. You know, the reality is the feeling of being unheard is very real. So I would say the first thing I would do is validate that she's probably been in so many relationships, not just with you, but in so many relationships where she hasn't felt like someone cares enough to hear the whole story. So I would say validate the need. There are times where whether it's as a disciple or even as a therapist, where I'll just let somebody go. Obviously, as a therapist, I do it, but sometimes it helps to set your expectations. If this person just needs to tell their story, then maybe clarifying, hey, can there be times where you let me know I need to talk all the way through it and just tell the whole story? Okay. And then you can kind of set your mind, I'm going to listen to a whole chapter. It's not going to be 2 or 3 sentences. This person needs to share a chapter, and I'm going to work really hard at staying present. If I start to wander or feel overwhelmed, I'm going to, guess what? Take a breath so I can stay present. So sometimes clarifying, but then you can also be honest and share, hey, when this happens each time we talk, it makes it hard for me. And I want to be able to be there for you. So can we have a really clear, at times you want to just unload, and I'm going to put my unload hat on. But then at other times, I think I need you to practice sharing with me concisely. Can we maybe be both? So I would say, validate the fact that she feels unheard, maybe not just but by you, but by life. Sometimes I tell people that they might need to write it all out first. They might need to journal first, get the out, and then they can come and say something in 2 to 3 sentences.
Okay.
So there's various things that people can do to help themselves, yes.
Mhm.
And then you may, at one point when she's ready, be able to share when words are many, sin is not absent.
Mhm.
I use that scripture for myself. I'm a person of many words. And so I have had to learn that my many words actually cause people to not want to listen. And it might not be clear sin. It might be, I speak a lot when I'm insecure. I talk, I use more details when I am wondering if someone's liking me or not, like today. Thanks for liking me, Mindy.
Uh-huh.
So I do think it's important that we give space for them to learn those skills.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Great question. So feel free to put your hand up, and also feel free to put it on the chat. Go ahead.
Jennifer, so we have first question on chat is, when you talked about oink and race,
Yeah.
the virtual shelf, when do you go back to revisit the issue? What is
Thank
the cooling off, or how long of a wait?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. That shelf is so important, and it's got, right, it's got trophies and important things up there. A lot of the times when somebody has put their things up on a shelf and then they go and genuinely have empathy and express empathy, then they go back to their shelf and they're like, most of the stuff's fallen off of it and it's not there anymore. But sometimes there's still stuff there. Like, you want to explain. Well, and saying sorry. I tell people, put the sorry aside. Don't say sorry. But you might go back and the sorry's there and you want to bring it down. Or the hurt that you feel about maybe the way they said it or your perspective on something might still be up on that shelf. And yes, there might be a cooling off time. Some people can do it right away and it works. For other people, when they come up and they look on their shelf and they say, hey, I have something I'd like to share. Can we do the same process in the other direction? Sometimes people can do that right away. Other times it feels too much like the finger pointing, like, well, you. So you may need to pause. So I tell people, ask the person who's just shared, is this a good time, or would it be helpful if we took a little break away and then I came and shared what's on my mind? And then do it 30 minutes later or the next morning. So sometimes you can actually have the person be a part of that decision about how much time is needed. I would say, though, you almost always need to check your shelf. If you put stuff up there, make sure you check it. Because again, you don't want to be a doormat. You want to bring that stuff down and talk about it. That, hey, I feel great about the talk that we just had. I do want to share that when you started to share and you said this, I felt scolded and unimportant. And so then you get to share your piece. So do go check your shelf. Do bring it down. I often get asked, so when can you say sorry? After there's empathy and understanding, sorries were great. Apologies are good. Go read the book. There's the 5 love languages, right? Well, there's the same author, Chapman, wrote the 5 languages of apology. Go read that book. It's so cool. And apology is good, but after you really get it. So go up on that shelf. If there's something that you're hurt about, bring it back down. You may need some time before you do it. And so maybe making them a part of it is a good idea.
So this isn't a question, but it was a statement that one of the folks had wrote. It said, I had an epiphany recently with my teenage daughter. I don't have to agree with her line of thinking in order to validate her feelings. And I just wanted to offer up that I like that so much, because after reading The Art of the Intimate Marriage, that became very an epiphany moment for me as well. And I think that if you haven't had that epiphany moment yet, doing these things, that moment just gives you, like, is that aha that, okay, I can approach any event going in the future and be able to see resolution to those things a lot faster than I would have before having that moment.
This piece, especially for teenagers. So let me really thank you for sharing that about your teenage daughter, and then Steve as well. Teenagers have so much going on. I just spoke with one earlier this week, and and this happens a lot in my office, where I love when I get the chance to work with adolescents and young adults. And one of the things that they do share about, either with their parents or with church leaders or with their ministry leader or even with their friends, or this is even in our ministries and in our homes, that when they do share, the other person gets so uncomfortable, they just quickly go on to other stuff. Or they try to explain why they did what they did. Or they give some kind of message of, well, that's not how you should feel. I do think it's vital for our youth that, if those of you, I think a good chunk of us on this call are not youth any longer. You might feel youthful, but you might not be youthful any longer. Our youth, our singles, our campus, our teens, our children, they are longing to be heard and to be respected for their thoughts and opinions. So I would say thank you so much for saying how important it is that you don't necessarily have to agree when they bring up. I just wrote an article that's coming out. The church, the teaching ministry for the church has its first journal coming out. We have a professional journal with professional speakers and writers and publishers that's coming out in soon. I don't know exactly when it's coming out. And so they asked me to write an article, and I wrote about empathy in all relationships. And one of the things I talked about was how right now we're going through, this happened in my office, where when the Me Too movement really started picking up pace, it kept coming up with the couples I work with, and with all of the women I worked with, all of the things they've gone through. Then everything with politics, with the last election, with the election coming up, was bringing up all kinds of stuff. And I had parents and kids disagreeing. And then everything having to do with COVID and the lockdowns and the social injustice and the different rioting and things that were happening around race. These young are wanting to talk. We are wanting to talk. People are wanting to talk about these really big issues. Slow it down. You might disagree with what your kid is saying, or what your friend is saying, or what this person said on Facebook or whatever. You might disagree, but you can still find out how they're feeling and why they view it that way. And you might actually learn something from them. You have to draw it out, though. Find out where they're getting that perspective. What have they read? What makes them think that way? What was that like when they saw that news broadcast? Drawing out Proverbs 20 verse 5, if you want to enhance your relationship, especially with those who are young, draw out what they're thinking. That in and of itself is validating when you ask questions to find out how they got there and why they think that way. And then feel free, if you have any other questions, to put it on the chat, or you can also just raise your hand. And you can unmute yourself. And so Ashley, go ahead. Or it might not be Ashley and Sandra. I don't think you're Ashley or Sandra.
Hey guys. So thank you, Jennifer, so much for doing all of this. One of the things that I think, if anything, when I look at what you're saying, or really internalizing what you're saying, kind of to Mindy's point, and some things that my wife has shared, sometimes we get into relationships, or we have a relationship, whether it's at work or whether it's, in a Bible talk, where it just seems like that other person is just continually doing that, even if you are using these, I guess, tactics sort of, and you're really trying to be that validator, and you're still trying to talk through things, but yet they continue. So when does there come a point where, just for our own sanity as the validator, to say, you know what, enough is enough. I don't think this relationship is working. How do I fix that yet still love them?
Thank you so much for that question. And that's a great point, because that is what our next class is about.
Okay. So I just segued into the other class. All right. Amen to that.
Good.
whole
So to
next
be continued.
to be continued. Thank you so much for bringing that up. The whole next class is on healthy boundaries. How do we, and at what point do we say, like, you know, I have members of my family who have alcohol problems, and they'll call me intoxicated. Should I just go ahead and listen to their ranting and raving on the phone? And at what point do I say, you know what, we're not going to continue this conversation? I have friendships with or relationships with people that they can be pretty attacking and they keep doing it. At what point do you say, you know, I would love to have this conversation, but if you keep speaking this way, that's not going to work? You know, like, how do you with a coworker, if they interact with you in ways that are just not okay, at what point do you say, you know what, I'd love to have this conversation, but it needs to happen in a more respectful way. When you're ready to do that, let's do it. So that is what we're going to talk about next week. All right.
Amen.
So,
thank you.
for that. Someone else, Steve, if you don't mind my just bringing this up, mentioned about it's really hard to sit in another person's pain. Can you bring tips on how to do that better? When someone is sharing painful feelings, painful experiences, what will actually, we know this from research in the field of psychology, you have mirror, as in like looking in a mirror, you have mirror neurons. Your brain literally mirrors what the other person is sending your way. It doesn't mean that you necessarily go, all of a sudden I'm an empathetic person when someone's sharing their pain. It means that your brain starts to fire when you're hearing distressing stories, like whether it's watching something or whether it's someone telling their story or hearing their pain, your brain starts to respond. In other words, you yourself, and this happens with therapists, it happens in discipling, it happens with our kids, with our close friends. What I mentioned earlier occurs, you become distressed. I talk about how someone's anxious and they start talking and your body goes, ooh, I'm starting to feel it. Your body does this kind of picking up on the other person's angst. When that occurs, one of the things that they talk a lot about in the field of psychology is what you call self-soothing. It's vital to learn how to self-soothe so that you can be present when the other person is activated, whether it's by their sadness, their pain, their hurt, their anger. So I do, the very first form of self-soothing that I help my clients do is to breathe. So we just did it. Let's do it all again. Breathe in your nose and out your mouth till there's nothing left, till there's nothing left, till breathe it all out, till there's nothing in there. Now breathe in your nose again. And you're going to fill your gut, fill your stomach. Now blow it out till there's nothing left. Blow it all out. And then in your nose. So the next time that you sit with somebody and they're sharing their pain and it's difficult to hear it for whatever reason, either you're getting all emotional yourself or you're getting defensive or whatever is happening for you, I tell people, slow it down. First with yourself, slow it down. They might notice you going, they're like, gosh, what am I doing that they have to take such big breaths? But the reality is you don't have to make it super obvious you're taking these breaths, but do take them. Take that. I mean, it's funny, as a therapist, I can always tell when something's really affecting me because my whole body goes. And so doing your own self-soothing, then being present with your own emotion, you do have emotions, they will come up, then helps you be present with theirs. So there's a whole approach called mindfulness, and we tend to think of mindfulness as being like this Eastern religious thing, but actually it's biblical. Being present, God is present. He is the God of all comfort and the Father of compassion. God when we feel intense pain or anxiety, he feels it with us. It literally says, this is a little bit from the empathy lesson a couple weeks ago. He stores up our tears in a bottle. I mean, he feels with us. So he is compassionate and patient with our emotions. So when you start to have your own emotions, when you're listening to somebody, be patient with your own emotions. God is patient. You might need to pray and breathe. And so mindfulness is staying present in the moment. So working on staying present. And then you are all the more, when people are trying to express empathy, they often have to start with recognizing their own emotions and being empathetic with themselves so that they can share with empathy. So I would say self-soothing, like breathing. I call it an exercise that I teach my clients is grounding, which is very simple. A grounding exercise that you can do this for a zillion different things. Grounding exercise is notice your clothing on your body. Notice where it's touching your skin. Notice the air in the room and how it feels against your skin. When you take that breath, notice the smells in the room. You can pay attention to the colors around you because you're listening to this person, hopefully, and hopefully you're looking at them as they're talking. You can stay present, let your heart rate come back down, and then put in those listening skills. You know, sometimes it can really help to go, I want to draw them out. Like to just remember, let a scripture come through your mind. You know, I want to understand, though it cost all I have. I want to get understanding. So then after you've kind of soothed yourself, you can bring yourself to a scripture that helps you to listen and then take a breath. So listening skills are a learned art. You might need to practice it a bit. Any other questions? You can put your hands up, or you can just unmute yourself and ask them. And your brains might be too full. Oh, we did good, Steve. We got 5 minutes and we can be done.
How about that? That's what happens when you have a excellent presentation. All the questions get answered during the presentation, right? So, you know, if there are no other questions, we can.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Go for it.
Honestly, Jennifer, I feel a little overwhelmed with with wanting to do this excellently.
Yes.
Feeling like I'm not a therapist and I feel like I need to be in order to adequately help people and wanting to do it well, but it feels like there's so much to be mindful of in it. I'm almost afraid to make some mistakes in the process, which I know will happen, but where do you go with that?
Start small. Breathe. Start small, and then practice reflecting. Just do those two things.
Okay.
Breathe, practice reflecting. Honestly, all by itself, if the only thing you're able to do is reflect, people often feel very validated just by that.
Thank you.
So yeah, I'd say practice that one skill and you'd be surprised because it is overwhelming. I'm laying a bunch out on you. So I do appreciate what a couple of you have shared here, that you're not the only one feeling overwhelmed, Mindy, someone says, and that we can all make mistakes together, that God does know our heart, and that is the truth. So, amen.
And I think it's also, you know, encouraging when, you know, Jennifer, you share stories of recent instances where you didn't quite, you know, do what you are able, you need to do, right? And that mistakes happen even for professionals. So again, it gives us all hope and understanding that this thing called life, as we muddle through this thing called life, that we're not gonna be stellar in every aspect, but if we make those small steps moving forward, starting with reflecting and moving on from there, that we will see improvement and be that much more like Jesus. So
Yeah. Amen.
yeah, thank you so much, Jennifer. We are coming up on the last 2 minutes, so if there's no final questions, we'll go ahead and close it out. And I appreciate everybody for joining in and contributing with your questions and your comments, and look forward to next week. And then Ashley's questions can get answered. Awesome. All right. Well,
Amen to that.
there you go. All right. Well, we will go ahead and close it out. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for hosting us, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
Jennifer.
Thank
You're
you, Jennifer.
Thanks,
Jenny.
Thank
Bye.
you.
So-
Thanks, friend.
So, Jennifer, you want to transfer control back to me so that I can close out the recording stuff.
Thank you.
It's been lovely being
Thank
with you
you.
all. I'm not even sure how to do that.
Good to
Go
see
down.
you, Linda. I see you there.
I think if you click on, you go to my name, like highlight my name and hit more. I think it shows up there to transfer,
All right.
make me the host.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Oh, it's been lovely being with everyone.
Hey, we missed last week. Where are the recordings?
They are, James Schultz sent out an email with a link for the recordings. If you
I
didn't get
think
that
you-
email,
Mhm.
it kind of depends on when people registered, I think. So
Well-
go ahead and check with him.
Yeah, I had a domain issue, so
Okay.
my email got a little screwy that week, so.
Yeah, maybe,
Yeah.
um,
So, but what's
So
going to
Rick-
happen with this one is I'm going to send it to James and to Sammy.
Uh-huh.
I'm imagining that they're kind of all posted in the same domain. Like one link doesn't take you just to one
That's what I would presume too.
class. So, but I'll ask that question and then just make sure that he's sending it all,
better.
to all of those on the email, or all those registered in class.
And there's the real me. Hi, thank you.
You're
Yeah, we
so
got a lot of,
welcome.
pardon?
You're so welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's very timely, especially with a lot of family mental
Mhm.
illness issues.
Oh gosh, right.
So, thank you so much.
Lovely being with you all.
Likewise, thank you for the time you give.
Glad to.
Right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Take care.